NC Port, raising the bacon, raising the bar. When I look at schools like Duke and Wake Forest, and I'm not picking on them, I'm just saying that historically they've not been football powerhouses at the national level, and neither has North Carolina or NC State for that matter. I don't know why, if you're John Curry, why you put so much money into football when your fans really care just as much, if not more, about basketball. And it was explained to me over the weekend that if you don't do that, you're going to eventually run into some friction with your conference because they want you to stay at a certain level. It's almost like you're trying to put all of this money into this endeavor that is about as reliable as saying, I have to hit the green number on the roulette wheel 4 times in a row. And if you feel that way about football with Duke and Wake Forest, NC State, and North Carolina, just to be honest, because they're not going to be at the top of the ACC in terms of football spending, how do you think you feel if you're the AD, Doug Gillen, at Appalachian State, or you're the AD, Michael Odlinger, at UNC Wilmington, and you're trying to do that in basketball? It's almost like you have to hit 20 green numbers in a row on a roulette wheel in this day and age. I mean, it is an absolute nightmare. Maybe at some point down the road, there is no ACC or Big Ten or SEC or Big 12 or Southern Conference. There's none of these conferences. They're playing, in more of a tier level of scheduling and putting those things together. But then you're going to have, like the NBA has now, the mid-season tournament to where it's just all the state schools getting together to try to get that creativity back involved, because what you don't see a lot of times in college athletics, and Kerry, your dad was an AD, and David, you've known ADs for the better part of 4 decades now. I was an AD. I don't see a lot of creativity coming from this bunch. And when you talk about Congress getting involved, that's just the ultimate cop-out to me. And lately, there has been a call for the United States Congress to get more involved. As David said, the U.S. Congress, the same collection of clowns that have a 29% approval rating right now, who can't do the jobs that they were actually elected to do, now want to play in the sports world. And a bill introduced recently in the U.S. House would scrap the NCAA for an American College Sports Association, another fun acronym, the ACSA. It's been submitted by House member Michael Baumgartner, Republican out of Washington State. It's called the Restore College Sports Act. And the ASCA would have a commissioner appointed by the president. So now we get politics put into this. Terms would include sharing of NIL funds among student athletes, equal distribution, socialism of the broadcast revenue, and the ability to transfer freely from one school to another. So we're not going to see any, improvement in that. But here's one facet that is destined to draw some strenuous objection from the coaching profession. Kerry, how would you feel if your maximum salary on an annual basis would be limited to 10 times the full cost of attendance at such institution? Would you be able to actually live in the vicinity of the Santa Clara campus if your salary was limited to that? I mean, what kind of revolt, David, Kerry, are we going to see from coaches if something like this, which is ridiculous, it's never going to happen, but if something like that were put into play?
Well, for one thing, if that limit was in place, I'd probably still be coaching, because it's probably 10 times more than what I was getting paid to coach. So, in the reverse, I'd probably welcome that limit, because it wouldn't be as much of a limit as much as something to aspire to get to and say, hey, I need to be at that to be able to stay here. But no, look, coaches, this is always going to be an argument, especially at the public institutions, being, for the most part, the highest paid people in public entities. Whether it's football or basketball, higher paid than, your most tenured professor, your president in most cases. But they do have an enormous responsibility. I mean, it's a 24/7 type role, especially now with there's really no time off, because the portal bleeds into, spring workouts now. And then the summer, you're allowed to go out and watch more. I mean, I pushed for a regulation on the the recruiting calendar years ago. I mean, when I was an assistant coach pushing for it, and not because we wanted time off, but it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy the way we had it set up to operate efficiently. And we had no universal dead period or blackout period. There was always a crossover between, and this is something else that doesn't get brought up or wasn't brought up a lot, certainly it won't be now, quarter schools versus semester schools. They're not on the same academic calendar when they start, when they break, when they finish. This led to an inefficiency in the August period that could be a natural time and when kids could come on your campus and visit. Instead of just saying, hey, let's just say we're not doing anything. And the regulation of that is if anything shows up related to recruiting between midnight on day 1 to midnight on day 14, it's a violation because at the time we're all worried about who's getting a leg up. And that's the nature of the competitiveness that coaches have. The other part of it is you have a traditional hierarchy. Your president hires your athletic director, hires the head coach. Now in the middle of all this, you got everything backwards and jumbled, as we talked about earlier. Head coaches now have to be their own general managers, or I'm as a head coach going to hire one. Who's going to hold everyone responsible? And look, I keep bringing up this point that kind of came out, had some pop, and then went away. Rick Barnes brought up a point about one of his players, and he didn't play in a game. I don't know if it was Ziegler or one of his other guys say, hey, that's what you're paid to do. Take that shot. Like at some point, there's going to be accountability towards these employees, whether, as DG and I point out, they're 1099 or not, you're still paying them. And this is what we're paying you to do. This is what these people in the stands are paying to see you do, just like they do in the NBA, although that's debatable in the regular season as an entertainment entity as opposed to a competitive one. Now the head coaches are being asked to do more than they've traditionally done, which is coach the team. David talked about the Power Four commissioners now looking for higher powers on how to operate a business if they're not traditionally trained in that or classically trained in that, as opposed to just an athletic department. Yes, you'd run it in a certain way, but there's a shift happening right now. And I think if you're going to start capping and putting in, you're going to lose coaches. I mean, you're going to lose coaches. The ones that are at the very highest of their profession that can operate efficiencies, not just in this level, but certainly in Europe, in the G League even, and obviously maybe in the NBA, and whatever transpires as a result of this and this professionalization of all the levels, you're going to lose the best coaches. It's not sustainable. I mean, I think even as you move towards these LLC models, I don't think that's a possibility that you're going to have a cap on college coaches coaching. You certainly don't have that in the coaches in the NBA, but you do have a cap on the people that you're paying to do the job. And that's obviously coming now with what the players are happening. There's just so much to unpack and what's going to change and what has to happen that I don't think the answer is to go in and say, hey, we're going to use Congress and use legalities to unify and get this organized. And in the meantime, we're going to structure it so that we don't get too far out of control by capping what we're paying the coaches. I don't think that's sustainable, and I don't think that has any legs.
It also doesn't really have any germane reference to what the real problems are. I would think, David, in your legal mind, let's tap into your legal brain. What is so tough about putting a contract in place that says, hey, transfer kid or high school kid, we want you to come play at the University of David Glenn. We want you to play here for 2 years with an option for a third that can be mutual agreeable, or one side or the other makes that decision. What is the stumbling block to schools putting something like that in place and then having some entity, be it the NCAA or the ACC or the ASCA, whatever it would be, to monitor that and regulate that?
Well, a couple things, including to your earlier question. Number one, just so people know, there have been more than 100 college sports-oriented bills run up the flagpole by various members of the United States Congress over the last 4 years.
Wow.
And none of them has gotten to a vote on the floor. So it's often kind of performance art and posturing and without a lot of substance behind it. Some of it's truly hollow, where people just want to grandstand. Some of it is genuine and authentic, but they just can't get enough support for it. Because remember, the way our government is structured, it would take, all the Republicans and 10 to 12 Democrats to get legislation through. And they look at things very differently, generally speaking, right? So, Republicans tend overall very anti-union, right? So in anything that would give college athletes a chance to organize or collectively bargain or unionize, Republicans are going to be skeptical of that. Well, the Democrats tend to be skeptical of giving those in power even more power. So, just granting college sports administrators some broad antitrust exemption. No, I personally don't trust powerful people to do the right thing all the time. And you give them more power, they usually get worse. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as the famous saying goes. So it's an unlikely scenario there. I'd also want to point out that the judge, she happens to be in her 70s. She's in the state of California. I think she's in the process of retiring. So Judge Claudia Wilken, who is the one controlling this House settlement, where if she signs off on it, and she's really, really close as we're having our conversation today, her new rules are expected to be in place by July 1st, which is kind of the launch of the new academic year for all these universities. So as many changes as we've had in the last 4 years, starting July 1st, we're going to have this new framework, again, assuming that Judge Wilkins signs off on this revenue sharing concept and a lot of other details. Judge Wilkins said during the course of her listening to arguments and feedback and the hashing out of this settlement, she said, I have not been asked in this case to deal with anything related to collective bargaining. But in my legal opinion, as the judge who's had to sort through 1,000 different details legally and otherwise, why don't you all just get together and collectively bargain? That's what she said. Now, again, she didn't have the power to impose that, but she's like, I've been in the law for 50 years. I see where all this is going. You're going to have to collectively bargain. And I bring that up because, Mike, part of the answer to your question is the NCAA has not given its schools the rights to this point to sign those contracts. Hey, if you come here, you'll get this, but if you do this, these are the consequences, because that starts to look more like employment, right? And the NCAA absolutely, positively does not want college athletes to be considered employees. It just takes it into a whole new stratosphere where you've got workers' compensation issues, you've got tax issues, you've got FICA issues, right? Another line on your W-2 form that is not in play in these third-party NIL deals. It's just a whole new universe. You want to talk about massive changes to the college model. That is one heck of a threshold. And it's a bridge they just don't want to cross anytime soon. What has the NCAA done for decades? If there's something they don't want to happen, they fight it, they fight it, they fight it, they fight it, they fight it. They kick the can down the road for as many years as they can, and then it finally happens. And that's what they're doing with this. At some point, college athletes are going to be able to unionize, whether you call it that or not. They're going to be able to collectively bargain, whether you call it that or not. Functionally, that is what is going to happen in major college sports, I believe, probably by the end of this decade. But Judge Wilkin didn't have the power to make that happen. Congress has not allowed that to happen. The NCAA doesn't want that to happen. The NCAA has not given its schools the power to do what you're suggesting might be a good idea. Where, most people say, hey, as long as two parties can negotiate freely, hey, sign here. This is what you get for 2 years. If you transfer out, in theory, you could have an athlete owe you a buyout clause to transfer out. Just like a coach, in reality, has to pay a buyout clause if he wants to leave school A to jump to school B. And of course, the school has a buyout clause on the coach, too, if he gets fired. You can negotiate all of those things on an individual player basis, but the NCAA, in theory, but the NCAA has not allowed that to happen. Again, they don't want to go down that road just yet. That road is coming. But, and real quick on your other point earlier, it would be patently illegal to limit head coaching salaries the way you described. So when I say performance,
not my idea.
No, I know it was not your idea. It's just a reminder of how so many people are unserious in the political world. It's not thoughtful. It's if you make that proposal, you haven't even asked your attorneys if it's a good idea yet. That's just dumb. So you can grandstand and hope your voters like you because you're trying to save college sports, but you just proposed a nonsensical bill that has A, no chance of passing, and B, is patently illegal. A head coach is going to sue and say that is an unreasonable restriction of trade, and a judge is going to say you're right, and then that rule goes away. Even if it was adopted for a day, it'd be dead the first time it got in front of a judge. We're in Never Never Land right now, man. It's a zoo, it's a circus, it's all of the abuzz, it's all of the above. Where's P.T. Barnum? Because he should be running this whole show, and he might do just as good a job as anybody else. The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by three actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up.
NC Pork, good for the plate, great for the state. When you talk about schools going after guys and getting money back, well, Arkansas and their athletics director, North Carolina native Hunter Yurachek, is already doing that, as they have empowered their collective to go after guys who have left John Calipari's basketball program following the 24-25 season. I mean, it is truly the season of crazy stuff, and sometimes there are crazy ideas that turn out working for the betterment of the sport. That's the one thing. You don't want to suppress anybody's ideas, because you never know where that one idea may lead down the road. And one of those came out during the waning parts of the 24-25 basketball season from an ACC rookie head coach in Kyle Smith, who proposed a relegation system for the ACC. His idea is that a relegation system akin to European soccer could help the Atlantic Coast Conference avoid having only a few teams make a deep NCAA tournament run. Now, this system would involve teams being relegated to a lower division of the ACC, similar to English soccer, based on their performance. So with an 18-team league, you could have the 9-team Super League and then the 9-team Premier League underneath that. Funny how that works. Now, the problem, Smith now believes that the ACC has an issue with consistency, where only a handful of teams perform well in the NCAA tournament. Well, that may or may not be the case. The solution he proposes: a relegation system where the bottom two teams in a top division would move down to the lower division, and the top two teams of the lower would move up to the upper. The benefits: he believes this system would incentivize more schools to invest in their basketball programs and could improve the overall competitiveness of the conference. With 18 teams in the ACC, Smith envisions two divisions of 9 teams. We talked about that. And he does say that this would be very complex in sorting out travel, scheduling, rivalries, this, that, and the other. But there are always ways around that. Guys, is there any way that this relegation mindset would be adopted by any conference? Could it be adopted by the ACC, or could a variation of this idea be put into place? Now, I will jump in at the get-go here and saying that I see absolutely no chance for this. That's my opinion, because I don't see a lot of, pelotas among the leadership of college athletics, much less in the ACC. Just paint with a big, broad stroke there. Nobody wants to do anything that's big and bold. So, my opinion is you're going to see more of the same, but I think this is a fascinating idea. I think it's a fascinating idea because it does put into play, maybe akin to the ACC revenue distribution right now, David, that you're seeing where, if you bring in a lot of eyeballs on TV from football or basketball, you're going to be rewarded more for that. That mindset is already in play. Why not take it to the next level? You know the ACC as well as anybody. What do you think the pushback would be from the old guard of the ACC?
Yeah, I wouldn't discount the possibility in the ACC or other leagues, especially if you tie it to scheduling. Because one thing that's a little bit different is the English soccer relegation system. If you finish at that very bottom of the Premier League, you're in an entirely new league the next year. In this form of relegation that you're describing, Mike, you're still a member of the ACC, right? You just might be slotted in a sort of a sub-league, right? But you're not leaving the ACC the way English soccer relegation truly bumps you down an entire league. You have a whole new, 18 new teams you're playing against. That's not this form of relegation, just to be clear for everybody. And what I mean by tying it to scheduling, one of the problems for the Atlantic Coast Conference, as remember, 4 bids as an 18-team league, 4 out of 18. That is the lowest percentage of NCAA tournament bids in the modern history of the Atlantic Coast Conference, dating back to the 1980s when they changed the rules about, how many teams a single conference was allowed to get into the NCAA tournament. In the 80s, the ACC would get like 6 out of 8. So you got 75% of your membership into the NCAA tournament. That's about as good as it gets, right? It's like the SEC this past season when that league set the all-time record for most bids from a single conference in a single tournament. Well, 4 out of 18, percentage-wise, is the worst ever for the ACC, again, in the modern era. One way that theoretically you could help that is if you had, what if it was a 3-tiered ACC, right? 18, just one option is, you have to come up with creative names, Mike, but there's the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third, right? If you do that and sort of who you expect to be good turns out to be true most years, well, then those top 6 teams, maybe they're playing the other 5 in that top 6 more frequently than in a randomly assigned schedule. And so one of the themes Coach has been hitting on all year, the importance of intelligent scheduling, this relegation within the ACC, 2 or 3 tiers, you'd automatically be playing. Like if you consulted with whoever you thought was good at forecasting next year's ACC, this current year we'd say, hey, Duke's going to be good. Louisville's going to be good. Carolina has a chance to be really good. I believe SMU has a chance to be really good. I think Clemson can be really good. And then whoever we pick as the 6th team. If you tie it to scheduling, well, then each of those 6 play the other 5 more often. And instead of those midsection of the ACC teams being weighed down by the lesser ACC teams on their schedule, they get more opportunities to beat Duke, to beat Louisville. It would have been like having more games this past season against Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. Those are power-packed opportunities for the middle tier teams to upgrade their resume in the eyes of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. So I won't dismiss it out of hand. I would hope the ACC would listen to Kyle Smith's proposal, kick it around. Like, what's the downside to kicking it around? I know some coaches didn't like him speaking the way he did because he was brand new to the ACC at the time, and they're like, "What's this new guy telling us how to run our business?" But given the state of ACC men's basketball, why not kick around the variations and see if the bottom line is this league needs more than 4 out of 18 teams in the NCAA tournament as an average moving forward. And anything that increases that possibility, including, as he said, giving more incentive to invest in men's basketball, because you don't want to be relegated to those bottom divisions, but also the scheduling element could help too.
So the best example of relegation that we now see in the current construct is obviously happening over with the Wrexham Football Club, who has now been promoted 3 years in a row in an unprecedented, now one level below the Premier League for soccer over in England. And it's completely due to the financial commitment of the outside investors of Ryan Reynolds and his partner, or is it Rob McElhenney? This is all about money. I mean, I'll give you a short answer to this right here. ACC wants to do relegation. It's only going to be based on financial commitment. And I'll go back to my own personal experience in the misconstrued view and understanding of what was happening when I was at Santa Clara. Our operating budget in 2007, when I arrived, operating budget for everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And Mike, you'll understand this better than anybody, was just about $300,000. At the time, Gonzaga's was 1.5 million. Forget about all the other stuff that they were doing too. So the relegation would have been easy. And this is what I grew to really like this guy as much as I thought I should loathe Gonzaga when I was at Santa Clara. I came to respect them as time kept passing and they kept kicking our butt, albeit mostly on the road. The games at home were at least close. And we did get them once. And the tournament games were close. Just as a side note. He and Mike Roth, he used to say, hey, look, it's all well and good if you want to say you want to do it. You got to pony up the money and do it. At the time, it was facilities. That was the arms race. It was travel. Do you want to actually charter and cut out time that you could gain academically? Are you going to travel with your academic coordinator to make up for that lost time if you weren't going to charter? And on and on and on. And his answer was quite simple. Hey, look, we're not saying we're better than everybody. We're just investing more in the program, and we expect the results that are coming, hence why we're investing in it and why we're also kicking all your butts too. It is what it is. St. Mary's made the step up, not in facilities, in operational budgeting, kept their coach, who after a couple of good years could have gone to the Pac-12. Utah, he's from Arizona. Arizona and Arizona State have changed their coaches 2, 3, 4 times since Randy Bennett's been at St. Mary's. You don't think he loved to run to go back home and coach in the Pac-12? No, because he's now put himself in that echelon of the WCC and whatever's left of it right now to say, hey, we're going to invest in operational efficiencies. It's happened already. Relegation has already happened, and I'm using the WCC from firsthand experience. It's already happened. It's why the same teams are winning every single year. Now, we're talking about a different animal here in the ACC. We don't want the same teams winning every year. We need some other teams to step up. And if you get more, SEC, we'll get more in. It doesn't have to just be the top 4. It can be 8, 9, 10, 13. This whole thing about relegation, while in theory makes sense, and it's a nice shiny toy that will look really cool at Christmas for about a week, are we going to keep playing with it when the batteries die the first time? Or are we going to chuck it in the pile? We can keep playing with it and get new batteries for it if all of the other teams want to pay for the batteries. Then we'll keep paying for it. Then we'll have the toy. We'll have to get a new one next Christmas when the next version comes out because we'll keep making this version better. Relegation is great in theory, and it works for the soccer. As David said, you play different teams. You can play the same type of teams, and maybe the relegation is, you know what? You don't get to play Duke and Carolina 4 times this year because you didn't put X amount of money in. Those are our best teams. I'm just using that as an example. So Boston College, you don't get to go and play 6 games in the Triangle. Based on this level, you get 3. And by the way, those are our best, highest rated teams. So it's going to affect your net rating in the end. In theory, it could definitely work, but it only, in my mind, is based on financial commitment. In this landscape, the resources are the performance. And it's a matter of how much you're willing to resource in your conference level right now.
Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas and Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE.
This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are second to none. They've grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Kerry, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more online at AtlanticTireOnline.com.
To me, the biggest change that the ACC could make, the easiest one to transition to immediately, would be to continue what was done this past year. 18 teams. How many teams made it to Charlotte? 15. Next year, I think they ought to say, hey, we're going to cut 3 more out and bring it down to 12. And if you can't make it into the top 12 of the league, maybe you don't deserve to be in the tournament to begin with. How do you make up the revenue that would be lost from that, all-important Tuesday or even the Wednesday of the ACC tournament? Play a few more regular season games. Maybe play that in-season tournament at the beginning of the year to kind of get everybody jump-started a bit, but do something that's creative that will put the focus on the excellent. Now, David, one of the things you and I talked about, well, if you only have 12 teams come to the ACC tournament, what about the opportunity to have 14 teams make the tournament like happened in the SEC? Yeah, that's a challenge, but at some point, doesn't the focus, gentlemen, have to be put back on being excellent instead of trying to manage to the lowest common denominator? It seems like more times than not in college athletics, more new ideas or innovations die on the vine because people just don't want to be caught in the chance that they don't make it and therefore they lose their jobs. That was my biggest frustration in my time in the SEC and the Big Ten as an administrator, because I did get the feeling that nobody really wanted to push the envelope anymore because they didn't want to risk their being vested in the retirement system or their big fat, high to mid 6-figure check as an administrator. That's a real problem that I incurred over my time in those leagues, and I can't imagine it's changed that much in the last 5-6 years since I've been out.
Yeah, there are a lot more college administrators who are caretakers than there are college administrators who are innovators. That would be one way to put it. And a lot of it is the fear of failure, right? If you want to be, there aren't a lot of entrepreneurial college
No.
sports administrators. They walked into a system and they don't necessarily want to break the mold. They want to live within that system. They want to survive as long as they can. They want to collect as many paychecks as they can. They want to kick the can down the road on those massive philosophical and financial issues that we were discussing earlier, rather than making an aggressive decision on how the world should look in college athletics. So your points are very well taken, Mike. And let's remember, especially since we talk so much about this 5-year period where there's so much change in college athletics, those changes have absolutely positively not been a byproduct of college administrators brainstorming or the NCAA president's philosophical decisions, or getting in a room and deciding and ironing out what the rules should be moving forward. Almost all of these major changes have been reactionary. There was nothing visionary about it. Well, where did name, image, likeness come from? Name, image, likeness was created because the NCAA kept getting sued and losing. Immediate eligibility transfers happened because the NCAA kept getting sued and losing. Like, these changes didn't happen out of the goodness of somebody's heart. These changes happened because it became an indefensible legal system for the NCAA to say, well, this is the way it's always been. And even though we're making billions of dollars with a B now, this is the way it's always going to be. They don't make changes out of the goodness of their heart. They make changes because of financial and legal pressure that essentially embraces the reality that even if we were born into a world where the dollars were not so large, And there were not $1 million a year coaches, much less $10 million a year coaches. Well, in that old world, if you're getting room, board, tuition, academic scholarship, that sounds like a pretty fair deal. Well, as the dollars went from the millions to the billions over time, and university presidents get to live in a free market and jump from school to school if the price is right, and head coaches get to live in a free market and jump from school to school if the price is right and negotiate their buyout number, and commissioners get to enjoy the free market and athletic directors get to enjoy the free market. Eventually, you're darn right, the athletes, the soldiers on the field, if you will, the product, they are going to want their slice of that infinitely bigger pie too. And if you just cling to the old rules that eventually became extremely exploitative, all those in power enjoyed the free market, but all those without power are just supposed to be happy with whatever crumbs were kicked down to them. That's nonsense. It's a nonsensical system. They were intelligent enough to know that, but they weren't innovative enough to change the system on their own. They made judges and lawsuits force that upon them. And I imagine that that's going to remain the case moving forward for these other issues that we've been discussing.
I'll give you an example from the 2012 NCAA convention. I'm the director of athletics at Towson University, and we had the same vote as a member of the then Colonial Athletic Association that the University of Maryland had. So Kevin Anderson is the AD in College Park. I'm the AD in Baltimore. And we're talking about there was a proposal out there that would have paid the football and men's and women's basketball and volleyball the full scholarship kids in college athletics. That's still the case today for the most part. They would pay them a stipend of $2,500. And I voted against that. And I got called by a Duke alum who is also a native of the state of Maryland, who is a national media person at the time. He says, "Why the hell are you voting against this?" And I said, "Because I don't think it's a very good idea." And he said, "Well, why should Towson have the same vote as Duke?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Why shouldn't they?" And because he was also a Duke alum, you'll be able to piece this together, David. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, I said, "But why don't we do this? Why don't we put this?" I said, "It's not necessarily a bad idea, but it's bad form. You're not thinking politically." And this is where you talk about being entrepreneurial. And I think I brought a little bit of this flair to the job. And I said, what they should have done was go to all of the guys and gals who are not full scholarship athletes and said, "We're going to give you $2,500 a year." And then who would have crowed up and said, "Well, that's not fair. We're the ones bringing in all the money." And I said, "Well, okay, we'll give you $5,000 a year." So you have a tier of the haves, the people who are bringing in the revenue, $5,000 a year. The people in the lower end, it would be $2,500 a year. And it was, say, for 500 student athletes, that's going to be about $2.5 million a year. I was summarily laughed out of the room. We'll never put that much money into this. Why would we do that? Now, what the hell looks good right now? Because if you take care of it right there, if you go ahead and feed them right then, maybe you don't have those lawsuits. You're eventually going to have a challenge to that. But they could have gotten out of this cheap 14, 15 years ago. And instead, they didn't want to do anything different because it was messing with their cheese. And that's the biggest problem. And as you said, most of the innovation has come from in the courts or from other types of challenges. Nobody got religion all of a sudden wanted to pay people. They'll never do that. They don't want to share the money. The haves never want to share with the have-nots. And it's so frustrating when you're at a place, and this was a conversation that I had when I was at the University of Illinois. I went into a staff meeting and I made a comment about something similar to this and how we could get behind this and take it forward to the Big Ten. And they said, "Yeah, I'm not messing with that because I've been here for 23 years. This is a direct quote. "I've been here for 23 years. I only have to make it to 25 to get my retirement. I'm not messing with anything." Great idea, but go ahead and charge your windmill, Mike. Well, at some point you just get tired of being around that. Now, when you see this type of mindset to where college athletics leaders and even some very prominent people in the media say that we need to go to Congress, you got to be kidding me, man. I mean, it's It is stunning. And I understand that they need a national solution to avoid different states putting forth different rules, but that's happening right now. You have a lot of states across these United States, all 50 of them, that are saying, well, we're not going to tax NIL payments in this state where they're going to do it in other states. I mean, it really is something to where, Kerry, you said earlier in our discussions this spring, it really is the Wild West and it's really about to blow up. I definitely see more of an opportunity for that type of nuclear implosion into the abyss of even more chaos at this point than at any point in my 56 years on this planet. I think it's just a very slippery slope right now, and I don't have any solutions anymore. I'm out of it. I don't know if you guys do. Kerry, David, you guys are really smart, but I don't see a way out of this that's going to be easy. I think there's going to be some really hard decisions that have to be made. Just my 2 cents.
One of my favorite movies is The Usual Suspects, and at the end of the movie, there's a reference to a quote about the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. So for decades, the true business of college basketball, recruiting battles, shoe company influences, under the table payments, academic manipulation, all under the facade of amateurism. Fans and media, and as you talked about, Mike, some administrators, they pretended that it's all about the student athletes. They were the ones getting paid, though, but it's all about school pride and student athletes. Well, the truth was, that was a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that was exploiting unpaid labor. It was right there in front of all of us. And it was all made to look invisible or benign, like it didn't exist. Yeah, it did. And the ones that try to expose it, they were just kind of dismissed. They were like the devil hidden in the quote. Well, then all of a sudden it got exposed. And now here's the new model. The second greatest trick was the devil convincing the world that he's a good guy. Okay. So now you got NIL and the transfer portal and conference realignment with football and some basketball. And now the system's pretending to be fixed. And here come the lawsuits, and the players got more freedom and movement, and half of them are in the portal. Well, in reality, now you got a whole new set of exploitive forces going on. You got the shady collectives and the pay for play in the beginning, agents posing as advisors without any certification of being an agent, total transactional recruiting happening, replacing true player development. So everyone thinks, oh, this is progress. But now you got progress to what? Total chaos, absolute greed, short-term thinking. And what that's going to do is completely harm and almost kill college basketball stability, culture, long-term player welfare. And now the new bad actors, right? The new devil, they're all wearing the mask of the reformer. They're going to convince everyone they're the good guys when the underlying issues that we just all laid out, they're just evolving. They're not going away, right? So, the first real game, they hid behind the amateur ideals. Now they're going to hide behind the exploitation, behind the false promise of empowerment. That is what's happening with all the chaos that's going on right now. So all these guys you're referring to are still the devil. They're just now in the second act of their trickeration.